Okay, wow. I love your background. I love all these books in your background.
Those are my history books, right from college days.
Wow.
And these are all our favorite books, all the classic writers. I mean, not classic writers in the sense of Robert Louis Stevenson and all those, but classic the East European writers and the Latin American writers and those ones.
Yes, yes. Okay, quickly to introduce, now that everything is running smoothly on our live, we have some viewers joining in.
Okay.
Today we're speaking to Anuradha Kumar, award-winning author of 8 books across a variety that I'm continuously amazed by, from historical fiction to crime and short stories. That's a range for children as well. Her latest book, Coming Back to the City Stories, based in Mumbai, was out earlier this year. Yes, I remember halfway through it. Since I just moved to Chicago about 8 months ago, it's nice to go back to reading about Mumbai. Thank you for joining us, Anu. I know Instagram is not the easiest platform.
No, yeah, thank you for having me, and you've been very sweet. You and Jessica be very sweet in explaining it all to me. So yeah, go well. I'm sure it will go well, actually.
We're learning as we conduct these as well. So you're in New Jersey. How are you? How's the situation with pandemic? Are you is everything comfortably shut, I guess?
Yeah, we are in North New Jersey, and New Jersey as a whole is badly affected. It's a state with the second largest number of affected cases and deaths after New York State. And we are off from the main city areas, our small town. So in our immediate environments, it's kind of okay because everybody follows the rules and does what the governor has done with his executive orders. But the weather is very nice today, so the beaches and some parks are lit up, and there have been protests against lockdown. So these next be crucial.
Yes, absolutely. Even in Chicago, the weather is, like you said, it's really nice, and the temptation to go out for a casual stroll is so much.
Yeah,
but we got to sort of resist that. Diving straight into the interview, but going back to your early days as a writer, you completed an MFA in Vermont. And for me, personally, as someone who likes to write and someone who's managing Purple Pencil, I've always followed the rise of the workshops, the programs, the tutorials, the online classes. So much is out there for anyone wanting to be a writer and needing some guidance. You having been in an environment which is, structured to creativity, can you tell us a little bit about how it helped you? Also, what writers should expect going into something like a writing class, for instance, to put it simply.
Yeah. Let me just say that I did my MFA when I had already had a few books published. Okay, I moved to the US about 8 years ago. And before that, for 6-7 years, I'd already been writing, and fortunately, I had a few books published. But getting into an MFA, I wanted to do this consciously, mainly because I think I didn't have. You need a certain self-awareness, an ability to be critical about yourself, which I think an MFA program gave me. And having said that, I wanted live feedback and criticism of my own work as I was writing it. And the MFA program was structured in such a way that it enabled this. Like, you have workshops, regular workshops, and then you're interacting with your advisor, sending stuff across to be read and critiqued in as brutal a way as possible, but it's helpful. So that kind of structure, that critique sort of helped me. And the other thing is, like growing up in India, like all good middle class brown skinned South Asian women, we were not. I think we grew up thinking that to think or to even talk about in the first person basis or the first person on the first person basis is just not done. If you use the I word too much in your writing, you shrink from that automatically. But what the MFA program did was to foster this self-awareness that only if you look inside yourself can you write about the world outside, not in a very self-involved way, but to do it in a more balanced way, that you understand yourself, and so you're better able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand the world around you. So it gave me that confidence also, the MFA program. So essentially, there's a lot of things, yeah.
No, that is awesome. That also puts you in an interesting place for my next question, because you already had something, you'd already written and published before joining the MFA. But is there something you learned very specifically in a structured writing environment that had been absent in your life as a writer before that?
I learned to have confidence that I could tell more complicated stories. That I could tell the stories and write the stories I really wanted to, and that I think it's automatically ingrained in some that your story is boring and it's dull, it's not worth writing about. But I think anything, if you have sufficiently explored it, can be written about in a worthwhile way, worthwhile for somebody else to read. So it gave me that confidence that I could write this book about Bombay and things that really mattered to me, rather than being hesitant and reluctant to put myself forward in words.
That is amazing to hear. That's important. I feel like confidence in something that's close to home is it's not as easy to be confident in something that's very personal to you. It's easier probably to be confident about something that's distant. Is that correct evaluation?
Yeah. This is going to be a very general statement, but yeah, women writers have hesitated to put themselves forward. In some sense, I mean, this is a loaded statement, but yeah, if you see the confidence, if you read Philip Roth or John Updike, I mean, the masters, right? I mean, they write their stuff with such ease and such suavity. I mean, at the other end of the spectrum, an Indian writer would find it hesitant to write with that same ease, confidence about their own subject matter. I mean, John Updike's stories are essentially about his own, hometown, and he takes apart from his own material, his own life material, and it's hard to do that when you've always held yourself back.
That's right. No, that's correct. And speaking of like complicated stories, and the confidence to write, what do you want to? How do you straddle writing across mediums, where not just age groups but genres? Also, you write for publications, as an author of fiction, as an author for children's stories, even historical fiction.
Yeah.
So how do you straddle multiple genres?
Yeah. This might be a very long, convoluted reply, so I hope
that is absolutely fine.
So I came into writing quite late. After making a series of mistakes. I'd been a failure in quite a lot of things before I stumbled into writing, and it was such a fortunate accident. And every day since then, I think, has been a gift that I have this time and space to write. But yeah, so I got into writing quite by accident, because that's another story by itself. And I began with writing short stories, and then I kind of sent them across to some writers. Kiran Nagarkar was one, and Pankaj Mishra was another, Shama Fateh Ali. And this was in the early 2000s, 2000, 2001, and maybe early days of email, so they were very encouraging. I think if I had done that, I mean, I'm horrified at my own gumption that I, barged into their time and, calmly asked them to read my stuff. But I'll ever be grateful to them. So, so I started with a novel, actually, because Kiran Nagarkar poses a very interesting question to me. He looked at my short stories and he said, "You should try a novel." And then I was flummoxed. I said, I thought that, who am I to write a novel? Because I at that time, I just thought I would be happy writing these few short stories and getting them published online. But he said that, you should be more ambitious and think of somebody who made you really angry when you were a child. And that sort of worked as a prompt for me. And I started work on my first novel, which, let me show that to you. It's this one.
Letters for God, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the cover. Love the
It
cover.
was published by Mappin, a publisher in Ahmedabad. It does all these nice art house books, the Malika Sarabhai and Bipin Shah's. Yeah, but then what happened was I got into children's writing, right? So if you're asking me how is it to straddle different genres, honestly now I wouldn't advise it, right? But but yeah, I got into children's writing because a whole lot of publishers had rejected this book, letters, right? But one of the editors who had rejected it, she was in Bombay where I lived and worked then, and she met me and she was from Penguin. She worked in Penguin then, and she said, "Why don't you, if you have children's stories ideas, let me put you in touch with my editors." And two of the editors, since that time, I think about 14, 15 years ago, the editors I have worked with, I continue to work with now to do the children's writing. But honestly, I always loved doing, novels. The ability to create whole new worlds, to sink into other people's lives, and become them for the short while that you're writing. I mean, I always liked doing that. But having said that, I found how do I put this, put this tactfully? I found there's a lot of resistance because, as I said, I found it to write literary fiction or to write complicated, big novels. You need you need to be established in a certain way, right? And here I was a non-entity with just one kind of novel out, even if it had got good reviews. I found a lot of. I didn't have many takers for my next novel. So I continued doing the children's writing, and also at that time I was moving countries. I moved from Bombay to Gurgaon to Singapore, and then here, and there was a lot of instability in my life, and I was also a bit nervous that I was lost. Here I am, a trailing expat wife with nothing to do except probably. Actually, in Singapore, people kept asking me, "When are you having your second child?" I was so quite honestly, that was irritating. But I had these opportunities to write for younger readers because Vatsala, the editor at Penguin, and then she's now with Hachette. Bless her soul, she asked me to do all these books, and it kept me kind of rooted in writing while I moved places, you know. So, but at the same time, I did my MFA with a different, which had me doing totally different kind of writing, and I honestly found it difficult to straddle the two kinds of writing. Not that children's writing is simple, never that. It's as complicated, but it needs a different kind of imaginative framework. A different way of seeing the world to write it for somebody else than it is to write literary fiction. So those challenges, sometimes I did 2 books for Vatsala right now, 2 years ago. she kept marking out sentences saying, "You sound so adult, you sound so adult." It's simplistic, but there's a certain way of, the imaginative rewriting of sentences that is necessary when you write for a younger reader. So grappling that was quite a challenge, especially now because I had to do all these kind of different writings simultaneously. So yeah. I stumbled quite.
No, that is such a real honest answer. Thank you. I mean, and also so it's really about practicality of making it as a writer. Sometimes these decisions are more about the pragmatics than the creative arc. Is that correct?
Partly, and also to be honest with oneself, like what exactly. To be really honest in that act of writing, that when you are typing a sentence, to throw yourself into that sentence and see whether whether you're reaching a reader. There's that one reader you have to imagine and see whether it's reaching them. And it's a certain honest and an ability to stand back from your work and see what you're doing right now, your life as a writer, your progression as a writer. So
yeah. Before I move on to the next, we have a question from Vanita Vishwanath who says, "Are there any good recommendations you have for writing workshops one could join in India or abroad?"
Recommendations for
writing programs either in India or abroad. Anything that you think would help writers?
In Bombay, there's this Bound India workshops. Michelle and Tanu they do that. I think they're pretty good because the feedback has been very good. Otherwise, there are online workshops. I wouldn't know how expensive they are, but there's Catapult, based out of New York, and they have online workshops. So I can think of those two immediately. The Bound India workshops, they have a Facebook page and a website, and they're very popular because they do good work. They have these podcasts that one can follow, and check out catapult.com. I think that's it.
Thank you for that. And picking back from where we were talking about writing across genres and for different audiences, you spoke about writing for different audiences, but I also want to speak about researching for genres, because as I'm going to assume here that writing historical fiction, writing about a city, writing crime, all of it requires a different kind and approach to research, and I guess a different process of conversion from research to fiction. So if you can walk us through a little bit of that.
Okay. I love most of my children's books have been on history, and I've done these three novels as Aditi K, historical fiction, Chandragupta, and these two.
Yeah, their pseudonym, yes.
Yeah. So
under your pseudonym.
Yeah, I did 5 years of history, college and university, and I loved the subject, and I had good teachers teaching me. So part of the research is because I love the subject, and fortunately I don't seem to get lost because there's so much stuff coming out, a lot of fake stuff. So that helps. Like when I did the historical fiction, I looked at the relevant text, and also, for example, in Chandragupta's life, see what Chanakya's life was about. There's more written about Chanakya's life than Chandragupta, but sort of extrapolate things from his life onto Chandragupta, and then use it imaginatively to construct a life of Chandragupta, contextualize it, and that's how it worked for historical fiction. For children's fiction, I started with doing a series of historical fiction featuring a detective, a 14-year-old time-traveling detective. So again, my background in history, I think, has been helpful in that regard. Crime fiction, I would love to do crime, but this is just one crime novel that I've done. It was more kind of, it was more of a work of literary crime, because it's how an event in a small town, how it impacted the people around, and how the murder is solved and how it takes place is just one portion of the bigger work. So so I guess it's mainly about reading a lot, and also researching in your chosen field, one that you love. Basically, writing is an act of love. And I think if you love the thing that you're writing about, I think the research automatically falls into place. It'll happen.
Is research like an ongoing process where you're writing and researching simultaneously, or is it that, okay, let me first read everything I can and then maybe I'll sit and type it out? Kind of.
For me, it happens simultaneously. Okay. I mean, there's nothing I love more than sinking into archives and going to libraries and finding out all the stuff that I write for Scroll.in sometimes. I mean, it's just I don't know, sometimes an interesting subject just comes up and I kind of sink into it, follow a link, and then I write about it. And the editors are very supportive. They encourage me to do this. And so the last 4-5 years, actually done quite a bit of that, sinking into a subject and trying to, I follow my nose in unearthing unusual things. And so for me, it's been simultaneous. So yeah.
That's nice. That's really nice. We had a question. I didn't want to ask it because I feel like you've answered this, but Pickett asks, why write under a pseudonym? Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's because I've been doing stuff for Hachette, and so they had this. It was my publisher and editor who wanted to do these emperor books as historical fiction,
And because by then I had already written some children's stuff as Anu Kumar, as Anuradha Kumar, they wanted this to be an entirely new thing. So I had to, so we thought this name out because it would be something entirely different. But it kind of helped me because, a big work of historical fiction is something I hadn't done before. So it helped me see myself differently and to throw myself into that different challenge as a different person altogether. So it was like jumping into a different kind of ocean. Yeah. So it helped.
Yeah.
To the first.
I often wonder, like in a world that is so open, so to speak, how does really having I was wondering how does having a different name or a different identity as an author help? But I guess it does. Maybe puts you in a different persona. I don't know if that's the word.
Initially we tried to keep it a secret, but obviously it got very difficult because when people reviewed the book or when they wanted to find out more about the book, they would ask questions, and even on Facebook, I found it very odd to talk of Aditi K, the third person. So, it's like it's a complicated balancing act. Like when I write. When I write, it's not me who's writing. I mean, I'm just sinking into the character and writing. When I'm judging the book, maybe I can put my. I mean, it's very easy for me to say this. Believe me, it's not. So I can probably step back and see what I'm doing wrong and what I need to correct, what I need to change entirely. So it helps. It helps a certain objective. It helps in a certain objective case. But yeah, it's a. I mean, everybody knows. I think Aditi K with a pseudonym and stuff like that. But it's okay. I like the act of writing more than anything else. So a name hasn't mattered ever, honestly. So
I see. Well, I hope that answers your question, Picket. We had one more. It says any recommended. So this is by Bolicon International. I think they're a page. But we've associated with them. Any recommended digital writers' rooms? I don't know how that's very different today in these times because everything is online. But if you have any specific answer which is different,
you need to explain that with digital rooms. So,
I think I'm going to assume and correct me if I'm wrong, Bolicon. It means just online communities for writers.
Okay. Well, honestly, I'm lost about this.
No problem. I had to acknowledge that the question has come, and if you can be a bit more clearer, Bolicon, we'd love to answer it.
No, a community always helps. I have my friends from my MFA days who sort of who read some of my chapters of this Bombay novel, and I've thanked them. But it's always an informal writing community that one should be part of, or you can even be part of a book club because the more you read, the better one gets as a writer. So being in a book club is also what I think is essential. But writing is by itself a very isolated act. If you do something in solitude, so that's the most important thing, that you have to write totally on your own, and only after that can one think of a community. I mean, of course, there are communities where people write together to kind of urge each other on. That's also useful, but I haven't tried it. I mean, in my MFA time, of course, all of us were writing something simultaneously and exchanging the stories in the workshop. So we had each other, and that kind of format still persists for some of us. My friends, I can easily tell them what I'm writing about and ask them to, and you assume an innate understanding that they'll have the ability to understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. But I suppose that's more organic than having something, joining something like. But yeah, I'm sure I'm not answering this properly, but yeah.
Okay, there's a long question. I think you've answered some of it. Writers, so We have a question that says you're one of the most prolific writers from India and write in a wide variety of hats: children's, historical, sci-fi, literary, murder mystery. And how do you switch hats so easily? So, writers Khandin, we've answered that question. If you go to our video after the live, you'll probably find it at 15-20 minutes.
Yeah.
But speaking of coming back to the city, which is your latest book, I have to point out, I love the cover, because right now, all of these images on social media of flamingos coming back to the city just really, it feels like very serendipitous to me that I happen to read this book at a time when I'm missing Mumbai so much. And I'm also seeing a very different side of Mumbai online. But just to credit to that. About writing for Mumbai, this question is from Akhila, who has reviewed the book for us. She says Mumbai has been romanticized by quite a few writers, and one of the predominant themes in coming back to the city stories is the air of nostalgia that surrounds the idea of Bombay of the 90s. Do you personally also believe the late 90s, with their character buildings, lively protests, was a golden age of the city?
Well, Bombay will always be, Bombay is the one city in India that I consider home, because I had a kind of very nomadic life thanks to my father's job and whatever. But having said that, this book encompasses Bombay from the 1950s to the present. And I'm fascinated by the story of Bombay from the 1950s to the 1980s. I think it was such a vibrant, cosmopolitan city. It still is, but just because it's history, somehow those decades really appealed to me. And I read the books. Speaking of that era, and I kind of sort of love those books, and I guess that was also at the back of my mind, but although it's very difficult to talk about this book strangely. Naresh Fernandez's book, Taj Mahal, Foxtrot, and all those books by Sujat on Bombay, the academic non-fiction books, Shanta Dwivedi's book on Bombay, The Cities Within, Sujata Patel and Alice Thorner's 2 books on Bombay, and Jim Maslow's work on Bombay. I kind of absorbed myself in that kind of reading when I worked in the Economic and Political Weekly for about 8 years. And as I said, I love history. So, in a couple of chapters, I did bring that part of Bombay in the second story on Neera Joshi, and the story after that on the Suhar, on the painter. But this is a book that encompasses a whole part of history of Bombay from the 1950s to the present. But and the story of the Economic and Political Weekly, where I worked, also includes this part of this history of Bombay from the 1950s to the present, and all this must have been, subconsciously or otherwise, part of my writing process. So and Bombay is my favorite city. It's home. I would consider it home. So
I know you've lived there for 14 years. You've lived there for 14 years. How do you often visit it also to sort of refresh your sense of the city or something like that?
Well, I have friends in the city still, and I was last there in 2016, so 4 years back. Yeah, so visit is overdue. Yeah, and we lived in Parel and Bandra. Parel, the textile mill land gave way to a lot of high rises and malls. So we were witness. It happened right when we lived there. And of course, the EPW had a lot of articles on that. So it was happening right. It was happening right when we lived there. So saw it happen, and it was kind of distressing and almost inevitable at the same time. So I put it all there in this book. Yeah. But again, it was made the book come alive. I mean, Pooja and Rena and Suhail and everyone here.
Yeah, it's really the people of Bombay, as they say. And it's very interesting. You've seen the change in the mill. We've only read, at least I know, I've only read about the shift, the union strikes, the difficulties that people went through as buildings were being redeveloped, etc., and the migration that took place within the city. But having lived through it, that just, you bring such a richness of experience as well. Did you write throughout? was that like a long gestation period for the book, or did you one day decide, okay, this is what my next project is going to be, and work towards it?
Yeah, actually, it happened quite organically. I had this, I think it's the fourth or fifth story in the book about Pooja. The Pooja, the woman in the crying in the bathroom. I started with that story, and at that time, I had no idea that it would become a Bombay novel. And when I started my MFA, that was the story I submitted, and it kind of it got to me. I think. This is getting a bit personal, but I will say it nevertheless. It's just that when I wrote about Pooja, I was bothered by the fact, or rather, by the fact that I was childless for a long time after my marriage, and I found a lot of societal pressures, and it was. I mean, this happened a long time ago, about 10 years ago, and I had no support at that time. So I want to write a story, putting myself in somebody else's shoes and see how she experienced that. So it became with that one story, and from that story about a woman crying in the bathroom and somebody else overhearing her, I found that it could become a whole novel about the city itself, a city that was teeming with various kinds of people with their own challenges, with their own ambitions, with their own complexities. And it just went on from there, because every month I had to write a new story, a new chapter of the book. And I thought I would do it in this way, that I would work my way through different characters, put myself in their shoes, and tell a story about Bombay. So from one person, it became a story of one city and these many people whose lives come and interact, whose lives intertwine with each other's, and how they interact with each other. And it took me quite some time. I think a first draft, the first stories were in 2 years, and then I revised, reworked, changed them, dropped some stories. So it took me 5 years to write the whole thing before I sent it to Speaking Tiger. And
before you even sent it, wow, that is a long time to stay with the stuff. That's amazing.
And after Speaking Tiger, I worked with the editor Anurag Vasnet to polish them further, and so 6-7 years. Yeah.
Well, on that note, if I may request you to read something, maybe a favorite book part of a favorite story or a section of the book for a bit, just to get draw readers into this world.
Yeah, you are. So how much time do I have? 5 minutes or 5
to 7 minutes? Yeah, we have time, but we also have a couple of questions that I want to touch upon before that. So 5 to 7 minutes. Not very rigid about it though.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll read from the story called Wives and Other Wheels, right? It's the fifth story, and I'll read it from somewhere in the middle, where Gauri is traveling from Chiplun to Bombay. Okay, and then there's an incident that happens. Okay, Gauri found herself a comfortable seat in the late night bus from Chiplun. She had already seen the movie that was playing, and she found herself laughing long before the others. But there was a girl who was laughing hard too, someone way up in the front. A few more minutes into the film, Gauri heard her again, speaking in loud, demanding tones this time. Gauri craned her neck and saw that it was a young woman in a sleeveless red shirt, and she was making a fuss about the air conditioning. She gave herself away as a city girl. Gauri closed her eyes to it all and turned away. True, it was hot, but the bus was full too. It was a 7-hour journey from Chiplun to the terminus in Dadar. The movie moved into its second half as the lights in the bus were dimmed and some people settled down to sleep. Gauri muttered her usual prayers as she drifted off to sleep. She was jolted awake sometime later by the shrill cry that broke through the sound of the television, over the gentle hum of the moving bus, and tore into her sleep. Gauri came to first in darkness and then in a blinding flash as the lights came on. For a long time, she did not know where she was. There were voices, figures moving up and down, and then, through a gap between flaying arms and jerking figures, she saw the girl again. A moving, dancing figure in red, her hair swinging loose, and she was shaking and moving malevolently. Gauri heard words she had never heard used. All she could make out was a litany, an unending torrent. The woman was speaking in English, angry, raging words spoken in a voice that rose higher with every note. How dare you? You did it. I caught you in the act. The tirade was directed at a man now fumbling with his shirt, gesturing abjectly with his hands, but the woman in the red shirt was uncontrollable. She moved up and down and with so much agitation that it took Gauri some moments to realize that the bus wasn't moving at all and that it was pitch dark outside. I grabbed his hand. It was here. The woman was pointing at her red shirt. Madam, there was an insect. Oh, and you think you saw it all in this darkness? Really? Someone stood up just as Gauri craned her neck to follow the exchange. Then more people rose in their seats, and the wall of people turned everything grey in front of her. But the voices carried, the woman's, and then Gauri heard others speak up too, and she knew clearly what had happened. Gauri felt a pang of sympathy, then a wave of anger. No place was safe anymore. Her sense of justice rose in equal measure. She nodded, and her nods kept pace with all her righteous thoughts. It's true. Women cannot ever be safe. The guy deserves a thrashing. Next, she heard the sounds of skin hitting skin, slaps like a hammer hitting stone, and then the man's yells. The woman insisted that the police be called immediately, and the tension in the bus only grew. The only thing glowing and alive in that darkness, Gauri noticed, was the bus burst on the hill road like a night creature, glowering and dangerous. Then she saw more people standing up, moving up and down the aisle, some taking down things from the overhead shelves. Soon other voices raised themselves in a low grumble. There were signs and gestures, and Gauri heard the words in different voices. How long must we wait? Her phone rang. It was Mahesh, and she told him of the delay. She drifted in and out of sleep as she waited, and the bus did not move. A slow grayness crept into the morning. There were rough voices, voices edgy with fatigue, and the guilty man's voice rang out still, now hoarse with his protests and explanations. It sounded like someone had pressed the repeat button for a television show. Is that? Do you want me to read more, or?
Yeah, I think we can read. If it feels like a natural stop, I don't want to force you into like a time bound.
I will go on. Okay. A few minutes later, Gauri realized the police were already there. There was a jeep parked alongside the road, blocking the road. There were vendors walking up and down, past every window, holding up water and packets of peanut candy. Then a phone rang and it was Gadke. She heard the impatience in her husband's voice. Mahesh told me you are late. Yes, an incident. Accident? No, she struggled for words and then in a lowered voice said with a note of excitement. Someone hurt a woman and, oh, so it was an accident. It's all right, he said to Gauri Zone. It's all right, when she couldn't explain it all to him. Mahesh will wait for you. With that, he hung up. At least things in her own small world were all right. There was still some jerkiness around her. The bus heaved and shook but did not move. She felt giddy and thought it was because of her broken sleep, or that she had not had her usual morning cup of tea. People were getting off the bus and she knew where they were heading off to. Gauri joined another woman as they squatted a thick bush, hiding them from the world. The woman began in a companionable way. I wish she hadn't made such a fuss. The driver was giving the man another seat and some of the men beat him up. They forced him to say sorry too. Gauri nodded, feeling the relief as the pressure eased. We are already late. My sons will go off to work now, the other woman went on, and I have to take an auto rickshaw. She prattled on about how the auto drivers in Mumbai fleeced you, especially if you were not careful. By the time they went back, Gauri saw that the police constables were questioning the man, and she found herself promising her companion that she would have her dropped home. I think I read the end of the section, so
yeah. I actually hadn't gotten to this story yet, and
okay.
Just how unfortunately relatable this is, right? Harassment being passed off as accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On public transport too.
Yeah, public transport. I know I've gone to college. I've used public transport nearly all my life, and it stings how relatable and true this is. But yeah, it's so beautifully written. We have a question from a viewer. Any suggestions on how to make a universe more immersive? And that's kind of a abrupt shift from reading about the coming back to the city and talking about writing, but yeah, it just popped up. It popped up a few minutes ago, so I thought I should address it. Any suggestions on how to make a universe more immersive?
Is it that Well, I can give you an example because just seeing that book here. If you think of the Harry Potter books, okay, that's my daughter's favorite and mine too. Just think of how she creates, a whole new world of Hogwarts and Harry's own inner life and his interactions with his friends and the world of Hogwarts and the teachers and the backstory of all the characters, Snape and Dumbledore and McGonagall. I mean, giving them all backstories and putting Harry's life in context and describing Hogwarts, describing his uncle's house on his aunt's house on Privet Drive, and the Granger house and Ron's house. Focusing on every aspect and on the world of the characters that you are describing. So it's creating a whole new world and imagining yourself in the lives of the characters who live in that world, maybe from another time, in another space, in another era. And if you ask me about this book Chandragupta, which is about 2000 years ago, it's not that about what I consciously tried to do. I'm not sure whether I succeeded or not. Was not just to write about his life, but how he thought, how he dressed, how what the mannerisms would be, how the worldview of people would be, where people did people have amorous relationships with other women just like on the spur of it, or how did they communicate to each other? How did they experience longing? How did they experience sadness? It's about imagining emotions and feelings in another time and another era and bringing it all into this world that you create. So it's basically you have to move yourself from one dimension to another and live in that world for a sufficiently long length of time to write about it. So
yeah. Just to add, I think as someone who's wanted to write but failed, I think patience is the key that ties all of this together, because it really just doesn't happen, right? Like a world built takes years. This book itself took 7 years, 5 years to write and build. I think that the element of patience is so important and integral to the act of writing.
Yeah, patience and a belief in yourself and an ability to resist, because there will be people there'll be a lot of rejections, a lot of people whom you'll not be able to convince that this is what you feel passionate about, that you believe in it. But to go on in spite of that, there should be a secret core in you that tells you to persist and go on with this world that you're creating, with what you're writing, in spite of all that comes in your way. Sometimes the act of writing itself is such a blessing and such a good thing that you're able to live in this world for long moments rather than facing what might be unhappiness, misery, and all the violence around. So I find that a blessing in itself that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do this for certain hours of the day, to remove myself.
Yeah. Sort of segue into my last question. How has the pandemic affected life as an author? Are you currently working on something? Has anything? How has that changed? Has it changed your approach to writing, your mental space to write things? The general environment of an author.
Well, yeah. I've always written in solitude, and I've written every day, sort of, because because I live here, I haven't done those usual writing tours or attended literary festivals unless it's online or something. But having said that, it's a good thing because it's given me all the more time to read and write. I get very cranky otherwise if I don't do a certain amount of reading or writing every day. And yeah, the pandemic has been, it's a very complicated thing because you don't know how it's going to turn out. We are living in this uncertainty and anxiety. And what I did for reading, it's just subconscious, but I went back to reading short stories because they don't take up a long chunk of your time and you can finish it at one go. So I returned to the short stories that I've always loved, Alice Munro and William Trevor and Nirmal Verma and so many others, John McGahern and Mavis Gallant and so many others. So I did a lot of comfort, but still it's kind of it's sort of healing in a very spiritual way. And about my schedule, did you ask me that also about my schedule?
Yeah, I was wondering how do you write in solitude? How the pandemic, if it has changed your approach to writing, even what you're writing about, anything, there's been a direct effect. I was just curious because it's such an unprecedented situation. I'm just curious more than anything.
Yeah, well, I'll just give you something that's just happened last 10 days. Somebody did ask me to write, they're bringing out something, a publication about, and approach different writers to ask about, to write a few thousand words on what, how life has been during the pandemic, and it's open to interpretation anyway. But I was just thinking that, there's family back in India, aging parents and so much uncertainty, and I'm not sure in what state I'll see them and when I'll see them. So I get that. I feel that similar longing that people in the past had when they just didn't have emails or WhatsApp or anything to reach out to people. So I can relate to that kind of feeling and emotion better now. And probably when I write that, it helps me sense that better. But actually, what I'm working on now is something that I've worked on before this whole thing started. So it's just that just goes on. But this whole situation has made me. I guess many people realize that things that you've taken for granted, they're actually very precious. The most ordinary things are things that one must value the most. And at least one is blessed with having a house, a roof over one's head, and a certain uniformity in your life compared to so many other people not so fortunate. So yeah, sound like sort of cliches, but yeah.
Yeah, a final few minutes left. Do you want to give us a glimpse of what your next work is going to be about?
Oh well, I'm not sure my publishers will. Well,
I'm a generic statement, if nothing.
So okay, when I moved to the US about 8 years ago, somehow I was fascinated by the lives of early South Asians. I think you've been here, you would find it very interesting and intriguing. The South Asians, compared to the Chinese and Japanese from East Asia, they came in a bit later to the US, 1890s, 1900s. And I got interested in their history, and I've been reading up a lot, looking up old newspapers. Thankfully, that's one thing that's digitally available, old newspapers from the 19th century. A book that I'm working on based on one of these characters who came in the early 20th century and whose life sort of encompasses some of the key moments of South Asian life here in the US. The Gadar Rebellion, which happened during the First World War, and there's struggles for citizenship when they were all naturalization rights, and they became aliens after the Supreme Court ruling in 1924. And how they lived as aliens, and how they finally got citizenship in the early 40s. So I'm working on a character who's very fascinating because he was a revolutionary. He was a self-help guru of sorts. I believe he acted in a few Hollywood movies as an extra and as a turban wrapper. They had all these movies set in Asia, the Kipling books that were turned into movies like Wee Willie Winkie. So, and they needed some people who could tie turbans on the characters, so to make them authentic. So he worked as a turban wrapper for a while. So that's a book I'm very excited about, and so that's non-fiction. And
as an insight, I think you've recently, or I don't know the date, but you've written about turban wrappers and scrolls, and I think that is a very fascinating article. So anyone who's interested in in this particular topic, I would really highly recommend that article. And okay, but I don't want the live to end automatically, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for so candidly sharing with us your journey as a writer. I've unfortunately only read Coming Back to the City, but it's such a comforting thing to read right now. I'm away from home for the first time, and it's so nice, and so I personally want to thank you for that. Thank you to everyone who joined in and out. We've had viewers. And I hope you stay safe, and looking forward to the next book when I as soon as it's published. I think I relate a little more to the earlier I just read it in stories, but I think after coming here I relate more to these characters who've built a life here, struggled through some of those things, as I faced those struggles. So yeah, I personally look forward to it as well.
And thank you, and everyone at Purple Pencil and the room for making this happen. And it was such a nice experience. And yeah, what I said has been useful, and it was a wonderful experience. And I was kind of anxious, but thank you for putting me at my ease and for all the lovely questions.
Oh, yeah, no, it went really well. Okay, bye bye. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Take care and stay safe. Okay.
Yes, you too.
Yeah. Bye.